We recently went to TGS in Tokyo. That's what the T stands for in TGS, Dave, if you didn't know.
Thanks for that.
To play Capcom games, including Resident Evil 2 Remake, which is long-awaited remake of a legendary game in the
I
Resident
never
Evil
played.
that you never played. So that's the angle we're going to take for this preview. So how did it actually feel? Because from my perspective as someone who's played every game in the series, it kind of, the thing that first stuck out to me was the way movement felt. And it feels a little bit, it's like a half step between Resident Evil 5 and 6, where you have this kind of like super, almost action game style control of the character into like, and the classic games where you're still quite restricted in the movement. How did it feel to you?
Like you said, it is very reminiscent of those games. It does take a lot of like nods to the way you move in like a third-person action game, but I think because it's a Resi game, the movement is still very deliberate. You can't just run and bounce off walls and like and dodge. You still have to be very careful with how you move. But it's way better than, in my opinion, than like the tank controls. It is a lot smoother. It does give you a lot more freedom, and the action feels like a bit more intense because you're like a bit closer to it. So
one of the things you mentioned there was tank controls, and the reason why people, they are defenders of tank controls, myself included, and a bunch of Resident Evil fans out there, is because it allows the developers to kind of choreograph scares better. Like, because you can control the way the player moves, and it's often slow and quite plodding, it builds up that tension when an enemy suddenly like ambushes you. And similarly with like the fixed camera.
That's it, the like, fixed camera angles and tank controls kind of go like hand in hand, right?
So how did it feel? Did it still feel scary and atmospheric with the kind of like over the shoulder camera and like the fluid movement and generally being able to really zip about the environment?
Yeah, like there was definitely still a lot of tension to it. Like that you lose, like going from like an over the shoulder angle, instead of having things hidden in like a fixed camera perspective, you're now like more consciously checking corners, the way you check doors, like the way when you walked up to a door, you'd like slowly open it so you kind of like look through a crease. I found those moments really tense, and because the camera angle is like fixed on your shoulder, you can only see like percentile of the room. So it's those transitions were some of the most tense moments. And while you've got the, we were talking before about the flashlights, because when you aim with your gun and when you're going into a darkened area, you get the flashlight out. Any movement your character makes is going to affect that light. And I found things like I walked past like a house plant, and the torch would like just be interrupted for a brief minute, but that small movement close to you is then amplified into like something completely different against the far wall. And then your imagination just goes, is that a liquor? Am I going to die? Is it a house plant?
So for some context, we played the Leon stuff that has been shown in a bunch of trailers, and then we played the Claire stuff, which starts off in the garage area of
the Claire stuff that we had, that we did in, was it Gamescom?
Yeah.
That was the fight with
William Birkin.
Yeah. This is a direct continuation of that.
So at the end of that demo, you meet Chief Irons, and he kind of kidnaps Sherry Birkin. And then from that point on is where we took over, and eventually you play through you kind of play in that environment to get out of the garage area and then go into like the police chief's quarters. And the thing that I kind of like really stuck out to me, which is what you said, was what it loses in controlled camera angles and kind of like being able to place the character, the player, in specific points to scare you, it kind of makes up for it in a general like pervading atmosphere. It felt very claustrophobic. I mean, you played more, but I watched a bunch of it as well and played a bit of it. That's the kind of thing that it seems to be going for way more as a whole, the entire game.
But you know, when you play scary games, you've always got that kind of sensation of like there's something behind you.
Yeah.
With a fixed camera angle, you don't really have that because you can see what's everywhere. But obviously with a new camera angle, I found myself constantly looking behind me. Not having any relation to the first games, I didn't know where to kind of expect enemies. Obviously it's way different, but I didn't know, like, is there going to be a licker behind me? Is there going to be a zombie around this corner? That new dimension of movement and like sight lines was like a 360 sphere of fear instead of just looking down and being scared of something.
Like the thing that got me was what you said, like I got unsettled by hitting reload, and as Claire reloaded, her hand passed in front of the flashlight and something flickered up in front of me, and I was like, oh no, it's just me reloading. And the thing, the expectation that you talk about there, like you don't know where, even someone who's played the game now doesn't know where the enemies are going to be, because they've mixed up how they're playing with expectation quite a bit. Like in the Leon section, there's that iconic moment where you go into a corridor and then you meet the Licker. That doesn't happen in this time round, and the Lickers are kind of like shuffled around, as are enemies. So like it's clearly they've understood what they're losing in the remake, like in modernizing it and making up for it in different ways. One of the things that I'm really interested in hearing about is how did the puzzle elements of it feel? Because for a lot of people who are just looking at it, they see an action game or they know Resident Evil as an action series, but this kind of like is a throwback to a classic Resident Evil series where, like 7, puzzles are a big deal. How did that feel to you?
It was, I mean, I'm a massive baby when it comes to horror games, so a part of me didn't like it, but like a big part of me can bloody respect it, because it was forcing me to places where I was like, I don't want to go there, man. Like, I don't want to have to backtrack to find this place because there might be a zombie and I've only got 2 bullets and my knife's nearly broken. It was that kind of forced, like, you need to find this to advance, instead of like some of the older horror games that I've played or some that I've been forced to play on this bloody channel. A lot of them was just solvable by like dashing past enemies and like just like nutting up and just sprinting forward. Whereas this, for me, again, like it being like one of the few Resident Evil games I've played, especially the classics, it was adding like an extra layer of pacing for me. So instead of like blurted out jumps or instances of fear, I was constantly just being like, this is a whole place where I don't want to be, and these damn puzzles are keeping me here.
That's one of the really interesting things that I found of playing the remake. It's kind of, they're going back and re-establishing or reusing the rules of survival horror that a bunch of them they created, and it really makes you appreciate what they did for survival horror and what Resident Evil has done for survival horror. That element of doing a puzzle in this game, back in the day, it just felt like doing a puzzle. It's just another thing. Now, when you've got experience and you think about game design a little more, like you understand that this also works to keep you in an area that you don't want to be in, and it kind of like creates that even pacing where you've had a fight with an enemy or encountered a Licker, and now you're doing this thing that's going to bring you down a bit. So then eventually it's going to ratchet up and scare you again, which I really, really love.
One thing that was really powerful from 7 as well was their use of sound, and now with the 2 remake, they've been able to use sound to a much better degree, because it's more directional from where your character is, right, rather than like the fixed perspective we've talked about.
The other thing that's exciting for a veteran and also for someone who's not new to it is like they're fleshing out Claire's story. It's a way more different than it used to be. Before it was like there was a lot of parallels between Leon's scenario and Claire's scenario, and they crossed over here and there. But it seems like there's more unique stuff in Claire's scenario, and that means there's more opportunities for storytelling. So we've got a bunch of like exploration of Chief Irons as a character in the short demo we played. You pick up like an official police magazine, and they're like, "Oh, this guy's real great.
Singing
He's
his
the
praises.
savior of the city." Yeah, and they're like really singing his praises. And then as you kind of get out of the garage and go into his quarters, you can read notes from him where he's clearly a wrong'un, and he's been up to no good, and he's been dealing with weird, shady organizations and really like treating his staff poorly. So like that's really exciting as well. So it seems like they've figured out a good mix of old and new, and exploring new territory that will keep like long-time fans engaged. So like I think we can both agree like we're very excited about this game.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to playing Resident Evil 2 for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, like I played a bunch of it, and remakes, as with most fans, like they're treated with a little bit of like apprehension. But I am way more confident about where they're going with this. I absolutely adored Resident Evil 7, and it kind of reignited my passion for the series, and it made me want more in that classic Resident Evil style.
What's it been, like 20 years as well?
Yeah, it's been a long, long time, and this game definitely feels like a good mix of like modern and classic Resident Evil. So I'm very, very hyped to play more. and you should be hyped too. But if you want to kind of build that hype, you can go to YouTube and GameSpot.com and watch some of our gameplay videos. We've got old ones, we've got new ones, we've got impression pieces. Keep an eye on the site as well, where we've got previews of the game as well as an interview coming up. In the meantime, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Tamoor.
I'm at a regular Dave.
And don't bite anything.
I don't think our viewers are zombies. Not yet, anyway.
Apart from maybe sandwiches, like food generally.
I know where this is going. I don't even play the game and I know where this is going.
Come back, I've got something to say.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.